Well, you've done underwater exploration as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What have you done there?
I lived for 2 weeks in the bottom of the sea.
Oh, Jesus.
And you just go down, and you have to swim, I don't know, it's like maybe 10, 15 feet. It's not that far. And there's what we call the gazebo, which is just a little dome.
Beneath the sky so clear it looked almost artificial, the research vessel drifted toward the circular shadow carved into the surface of the Caribbean. The Great Blue Hole, already a marvel that had inspired generations of divers, geologists, and adventurers, waited below like an ancient pupil staring upward from the seafloor. The team had explored its upper chambers before, but never like this. Today, they descended in a state-of-the-art submersible built specifically to enter the caverns and vertical limestone corridors that even the most seasoned technical divers could not reach safely. As the submarine prepared to break the surface tension and slip into the azure darkness, the experts inside braced for discoveries that would challenge assumptions about underwater sinkholes and the history they entomb. Before we start, smash the like and subscribe buttons for more updates. The initial descent was deceptively serene. Sunlight filtered down in shimmering columns, illuminating the submarine's titanium hull and casting wavy shadows against the massive walls of ancient reef. The Great Blue Hole had formed during the last ice age, when sea levels were far lower and the cavern was landlocked, dry, and echoing. Millennia later, the ocean had swallowed it whole. The walls preserved that ancient environment like a time capsule. Stalactites, fossilized marine life, and geological signatures from eras long before humanity took shape. For decades, these features had been mapped only in fragments. The submarine's team, composed of marine geologists, cave scientists, and oceanographers, now carried the technology necessary to see what lay miles beyond the reach of dive lines. At around 30 meters, the water shifted from sky blue to cobalt, and then deeper still to a velvet indigo that seemed to swallow the external lights. As the submersible continued down, each meter peeled back a layer of prehistory. Limestone ridges protruded like the ribs of ancient beasts, and mineral formations spiraled along the walls in patterns too precise to be accidental, yet too enormous to comprehend at once. The team focused their cameras, scanning the formations to determine their precise ages. The readings stunned them. Some structures had remained unchanged for tens of thousands of years, preserved by the stable environment of the cavern. It was as though time had paused inside this underwater cathedral. Further down, the submarine reached the level where recreational divers rarely ventured due to the hazardous buildup of hydrogen sulfide. Here, the water turned milky, and visibility blurred into an eerie green fog. The layer hovered almost like a cloud, dividing the upper blue water from the anoxic darkness below. The submersible pierced the layer, and the world transformed instantly. The haze clung to the hull, refracting the external lights into ghost-like halos. The team noted the chemical measurements climbing sharply, confirming the toxic nature of this band that had likely claimed the lives of many creatures that wandered into it. Beneath this boundary, few living things survived, making anything preserved below potentially extraordinary. Once the submarine emerged from the toxic layer, the water cleared again but darkened sharply. With almost no natural light able to reach this depth, the cavern glowed only where the submersible's beams landed. The walls were coated in streaks of mineral residue, cascading downward in vertical veins. But then, something unusual appeared, shapes that did not match the expected geometry of natural limestone deposits. The team maneuvered closer. The formations resembled columns, not unlike pillars carved by deliberate hands. Their surfaces were smooth, curving inward and outward in patterns that evoked architecture rather than geology. The experts studied the structures with high-resolution imaging equipment, suspecting there must be a rational natural explanation, but every measurement confounded expectations. The columns were composed of the same coral limestone as the cavern itself, yet eroded in a uniform, symmetrical manner that defied random chance. Some of the vertical shafts appeared almost perfectly cylindrical, spaced at intervals that suggested consistent mathematical spacing. These were not remnants of human construction. No advanced civilization existed when the cavern formed, but they were patterns shaped by water, chemistry, and time in ways no one had ever documented. The possibility that similar formations existed elsewhere on Earth but remained undiscovered sparked a wave of excitement inside the submersible. As they continued downward, the cavern widened dramatically. The sonar mapping systems announced a drop-off ahead. The Great Blue Hole was far deeper than previously charted, but what awaited them in its lower recesses went beyond pure depth readings. The beams illuminated the remnants of immense stalactites and stalagmites, some broken, others intact. Their dimensions were colossal, far larger than any that had been photographed in prior expeditions. The submarine's captain navigated around them carefully, aware that even a slight collision could shatter a structure that had stood since a time when mammoths roamed the Earth. In the heart of this chamber lay something that caused the entire crew to freeze. Along the cavern floor stretched a dark, elongated silhouette, partially buried in sediment. At first glance, it seemed like nothing more than rock. But as the sub maneuvered around it, the lights exposed ridges along the length of the object, ridges that resembled vertebrae. The possibility emerged that this was the fossilized skeleton of a massive marine creature that had either fallen into the hole or lived within it when sea levels were different. The shape, however, did not match the profile of known extinct whales or sharks. It appeared even older, predating recognizable marine megafauna. The structure was too linear, too continuous, and the segments too evenly spaced. The team zoomed their cameras, recording every detail. If confirmed, this would be one of the most complete and oldest large vertebrate fossils ever found underwater. The implications ranged from evolutionary biology to climate modeling. How had such a creature ended up here? Was this sinkhole once part of a larger cave system that provided refuge for species that later vanished? The submarine scanners suggested the fossil extended several meters beyond what the lights could reach, implying that the creature had been truly enormous. The discovery alone would have warranted an entire expedition, but the surprises within the Great Blue Hole were far from over. The submarine advanced past the skeletal formation into a narrow vertical shaft. This passageway seemed to spiral downward like the throat of some ancient geological beast. The walls were smoother here, almost polished, with mineral streaks that glimmered like metallic threads. As they descended, soft vibrations hummed through the submersible hull. The readings indicated the presence of faint underwater currents circulating through the shaft. These currents were unexpected, suggesting a deeper connection between the blue hole and an even larger cave system beneath the seafloor. The realization sent a ripple of excitement through the team. If networks like this existed, they could reshape everything known about subterranean marine geography. The passage eventually opened into a vast chamber completely concealed from previous surveys. The walls were covered in layers of mineral deposits that looked like frozen waves, their rippling surfaces carved by the slow dance of water and geological shifts across eons. This chamber was unlike the upper cavern. It had a stillness that felt untouched since its creation, an atmosphere so pristine that even the submersible's lights seemed hesitant to disturb it. Suspended particles shimmered in the beams like ancient dust motes caught in a cathedral's stained glass glow. And then came the structure that truly shocked the world. Rising from the chamber floor was an enormous conical formation that towered nearly 20 meters. It was unlike any stalagmite ever documented. Its layers alternated between dark and pale bands, each ring representing a different geological epoch. But the pattern of the bands was not random. They formed a sequential record, capturing shifts in climate, ocean salinity, volcanic activity, and atmospheric composition over tens of thousands of years. The formation was essentially a natural archive, a geological library readable like the rings of a tree but on a much grander scale. More astonishing still was what the outermost layers revealed. The chemical analysis indicated several abrupt environmental changes, rapid warming intervals, sudden influxes of fresh water, sharp increases in volcanic ash deposition that were far more extreme than historical models suggested. These records aligned with known paleoclimate events but indicated a frequency and severity previously unrecognized. The structure held a detailed physical account of Earth's ancient climate cycles, preserved more clearly and continuously than any ice core sample could provide. The implications were immediate and profound. This formation could allow scientists to reconstruct past climate transitions with unprecedented accuracy. Each band represented a chapter in Earth's deep history, offering insight into patterns that could refine and possibly redefine modern climate predictions. The ability to map the speed and scale of prehistoric climate changes could reveal whether the planet had ever warmed or cooled at rates comparable to today's trends. For researchers, this was a treasure beyond measure, but the shocks continued. Embedded within some of the mid-level bands were microfossils that did not match known species cataloged in the region. These minuscule forms were captured during eras when the cavern was dry, meaning they originated from terrestrial ecosystems that no longer existed. Their discovery suggested unknown environmental transitions in Central America's prehistoric climate and offered clues to the evolution of species once isolated within cave systems before the region was submerged. The microfossils presented a narrative of ecological shifts that no human had ever witnessed. The team collected samples cautiously, knowing the chamber's integrity had remained undisturbed for ages. Each sample represented a piece of Earth's memory, an opportunity to decode stories that had been locked away since the last ice age. As they cataloged the findings, their sensors picked up something even more unexpected on the far side of the chamber, a tunnel narrower than the submarine's hull, barely accessible but unmistakably present. The sonar revealed that the tunnel extended far beyond the chamber in a winding path deeper into the bedrock. While they could not enter it, the mapping suggested an elaborate labyrinth branching outward from the Great Blue Hole. This meant that the sinkhole was not an isolated geological formation, but part of a vast subterranean system. Such networks, if widespread, could influence groundwater flow, nutrient cycles, and even seismic stability in ways previously overlooked. The implications extended into hydrology, tectonics, and marine biology. If similar systems existed elsewhere in the world, they could represent hidden engines of ecological change operating beneath the ocean floor. As the submarine prepared to ascend from the chamber, the team paused to absorb the enormity of what they had uncovered. The Great Blue Hole had long been considered a marvel, but now it stood revealed as one of Earth's greatest geological archives, a natural vault containing the story of climate cycles, extinct ecosystems, and subterranean networks that had shaped the planet long before recorded history. The ascent through the black. Stillness felt different than the descent. Every meter upward carried the weight of new knowledge. The team passed the silent columns whose symmetry defied expectations. They drifted once more past the ancient vertebrae, half buried in sediment, imagining the vast creature navigating waters that no longer existed. They rose through the toxic layer, watching the haze curl away from the lights, and finally reached the illuminated blues near the surface that made the world feel modern and familiar again. Breaking through the water, the submarine emerged into sunlight, but everything felt changed. The team carried with them discoveries capable of reshaping scientific understanding across multiple disciplines. The Great Blue Hole had revealed itself not merely as a geological wonder, but as a keeper of Earth's deepest secrets, preserving them in silence until technology, curiosity, and courage aligned to uncover them. The implications would ripple outward for decades. The unbroken climate record captured in mineral rings offered keys to understanding future global shifts. The fossils embedded within the cavern walls expanded the mapping of prehistoric life. The hidden subterranean network hinted at a world below the ocean floor more intricate than imagined, and the sheer existence of formations that defied conventional geological explanations challenged scientists to reconsider the forces shaping underwater caverns. The sunlight faded behind the submarine as it once again descended into the deep blue world, this time into a mystery far larger than the team had anticipated. During the initial ascent, the experts had agreed unanimously that a second dive was essential. The chamber they discovered and the remarkable clues it held was only the beginning. Much of the cavern remained unexamined, and the astonishing revelations suggested even greater secrets hidden in the labyrinth beneath. Preparations for a follow-up dive began almost immediately. Within hours, equipment was recalibrated, additional sensors installed, and data storage expanded to capture every nuance of this largely untouched environment. The return descent felt different. The experts now carried expectations shaped by what they had already uncovered, yet those expectations only sharpened their focus. The submarine drifted into the depths once more, following the familiar path through the descending bands of light until the world around them dissolved into shadow. They passed the mineral veins carved into the cavern walls, each carrying the story of a distant age. Below the toxic layer, where the water grew perfectly still, the sub glided into a realm shaped by geological and climatic rhythms older than human memory. This time, rather than traveling directly toward the chamber with the colossal climate archive, the team oriented the sub toward a region the sonar had only partially mapped during the first expedition. It lay perpendicular to the main cavern wall, a dark recess wide, enough to conceal geological phenomena unlike anything previously cataloged. As the beams of the submersible's lights pierced the opening, a vast corridor appeared, its ceiling jagged with mineral protrusions. These formations tapered downward like frozen curtains of glass, some breaking apart into delicate threads no thicker than hair. The corridor itself sloped subtly downward, and the submarine followed its gentle descent. Soon, a new environment emerged, one shaped by the slow, rhythmic pulse of sediment-laden water that had flowed through the cavern over thousands of years. The walls were textured with layered silt, pressed into ridges that resembled ripples in petrified sand. These markings were so intricate that the team realized they represented episodic flooding events from eras when sea levels fluctuated dramatically. The corridor was not simply a passage, it was a geological logbook, recording regional sea level oscillations through physical impressions. As the submarine continued deeper, it entered a wider hollow where the floor was littered with spherical nodules of varying sizes. Some were no larger than pebbles, while others were nearly as wide as the submersible itself. Their surfaces were smooth, subtly reflective, and layered with concentric bands. The experts quickly recognized them as manganese concretions, typically formed in deep ocean basins over millions of years. Their presence in this hidden underground chamber was startling. For such formations to exist here, the water chemistry must have undergone dramatic shifts at intervals throughout the cavern's history. Even more intriguing was the density of the concretions. In most regions of the world, they grew slowly at rates of a few millimeters per million years. Here, the nodules had clearly developed in multiple phases, indicating repeated cycles of mineral-rich water entering the cavern through subterranean conduits. This finding supported the growing theory that the Great Blue Hole was not an isolated void, but part of a dynamic system connected to broader geological networks beneath the seafloor. While the team examined these nodules, one of the sensors detected faint metallic traces inconsistent with manganese or iron. They maneuvered closer to a cluster of smaller spheres. Embedded within several layers were thin, silvery threads of a mineral rarely found in underwater caves, native silver. Its presence hinted at hydrothermal interactions deep underground, possibly linked to volcanic activity from distant epochs. If such mineralization occurred here, it meant that the cavern system once interacted with geothermal vents or similar structures, a revelation that transformed the understanding of this region's geological past. Continuing their exploration, the submarine navigated another downward slope. The corridor narrowed slightly before opening into a vast chamber unlike any they had encountered. The ceiling arched high above like the dome of an underground cathedral. Streaks of crystalline calcite shimmered across it, reflecting the submersible's light in fractured rainbows. The splendor of the chamber was breathtaking, but what captured the experts' attention was the structure dominating its center. Standing alone in the middle of the chamber was a towering pillar, twice the height of the conical archive discovered earlier. This new formation was slender and elegant, tapering upward in a spiraling pattern that wrapped around its core like a helix. It resembled a giant corkscrew of stone, formed by mineral-rich droplets that fell in a slow, rotating pattern due to subtle air currents that once flowed through the cavern before it flooded. The spiral pillar told an entirely different story from the conical archive. Whereas the earlier discovery recorded climate history, this pillar preserved aerodynamic patterns of prehistoric cave airflow. Such formations were exceedingly rare, and none existed underwater at this scale. The pillar's intricate twists preserved a physical record of how ancient winds moved through the cavern system, allowing researchers to reconstruct the shape and layout of passages that had long since collapsed or been submerged. Beneath the pillar, the floor sloped into a pool of viscous sediment. It was a mixture of clay and finely powdered limestone, its surface undisturbed. The team noted that the sediment layers were perfectly stratified, a sign that even minor disturbances had not occurred for millennia. The pool likely formed when the chamber began to flood, capturing sediments carried through the system. Within this clay, the team detected pockets of preserved organic material. These remains were microscopic yet invaluable. They included spores, pollen, and traces of plant matter from an era when the cavern sat far above sea level. The presence of terrestrial biological material from the cave's dry period offered insight into Central America's prehistoric vegetation patterns. Some pollen types appeared consistent with species still present in the region, but others were from plants long extinct. Their shapes were unlike any in modern catalogs, yet were perfectly preserved. Tiny fossils revealing ecological transitions triggered by climatic change and rising sea levels. These discoveries expanded the environmental story told by the mineral rings in the first chamber, but added a biological lens to it. As the researchers collected samples, the sonar detected a faint pulsation emanating from deeper within the chamber. It was rhythmic, almost like a heartbeat, but clearly mechanical in origin. The team discovered it was not biological, rather it was the echo of water flowing through a narrow fissure somewhere beyond the chamber wall. The fissure was too small for the submersible to enter, but the sound indicated continuous movement. The directionality of the pulses suggested a large void on the other side. Curiosity demanded further exploration. The submarine followed the pulse toward its origin, eventually arriving at the base of the chamber where a slit in the limestone revealed a faint blue glow. It was caused by bioluminescent organisms, tiny, flickering points of light clinging to the fissure walls. Their presence here was completely unexpected. Bioluminescent species typically survive in open water or shallow marine caves, but not in deep isolated systems like this one. Their survival meant there must be a supply of oxygen and nutrients flowing into this region, despite the cavern's sealed appearance. To understand how these organisms reached this environment and how they continued to thrive, the experts studied the water composition near the fissure. The readings showed slightly elevated oxygen levels and a trace amount of sulfur compounds. These characteristics pointed to the existence of a chemolithotrophic ecosystem, life sustained not by sunlight, but by chemical energy from mineral interactions deep underground. Many such ecosystems exist near hydrothermal vents, but finding one in a limestone cavern beneath the Caribbean Sea was unprecedented. The implications were profound. If life could thrive here, isolated, chemically sustained, and evolutionarily distinct, it hinted at possibilities for similar ecosystems elsewhere on Earth and even on other planets. The cavern represented a natural laboratory for studying how life adapts to isolated, extreme environments. The bioluminescent organisms themselves likely evolved unique metabolic pathways, potentially offering insights into biochemical processes unseen in conventional marine environments. Moving past the fissure's glow, the submarine approached another tunnel leading downward. This tunnel was wide enough to allow passage, but its walls were heavily scalloped, indicating rapid water flow at some point in the past. The tunnel bent sharply, forcing the sub to tilt as it navigated the descent. As they progressed, the water temperature dropped. Sensors traced a current of cooler water flowing upward from below, suggesting the presence of a deeper chamber. When the sub emerged from the tunnel, the team found themselves in a breathtakingly vast cavity. The chamber stretched farther than the lights could reach. Small reflective surfaces dotted the walls, catching the illumination and scattering it across the cavern like stars. These reflective patches were crystals, gigantic, blade-like formations of gypsum that grew outward in long spines. Some were several meters long, translucent and shimmering. They crossed each other like frozen lances, creating an alien landscape of glittering mineral architecture. This gypsum cavern likely formed during a period when the cave was dry and exposed to air saturated with sulfate-rich vapors. As groundwater seeped in and evaporated repeatedly, crystals grew layer by layer. The presence of such enormous formations indicated incredibly stable environmental conditions, lasting tens of thousands of years. Unlike the delicate spiraling pillar or the conical archive, these crystals represented a completely different formative process, one tied to chemical saturation and slow atmospheric shifts. While navigating through these crystal fields, the team encountered pockets of warm water rising gently from vents along the cavern floor. These vents were not volcanic. Instead, they appeared to be the release points of geothermal heat conducted through the limestone from deep beneath the seafloor. Their temperature was mild but consistent. The vents created microhabitats where microbial colonies thrived, forming thin mats of colorless biofilm that adhered to the limestone. Their existence further confirmed the presence of a subterranean ecosystem independent of surface environments. In the center of the cavern, however, was a structure even more astonishing. A ring-shaped depression in the floor, almost perfectly circular, held a pool of water darker than the surrounding environment. It was so black that the team initially thought it was a void. When the sub approached, they realized the water in the pool was denser, enriched with minerals and carrying higher salinity. This dense water lay beneath a delicate boundary layer where it met the surrounding liquid but did not mix. Such brine pools had been documented in deep oceans, often associated with methane seeps or salt domes, but discovering one inside the Great Blue Hole suggested a far more complex subterranean network. The chemistry of the pool indicated that minerals dissolved from ancient salt layers deep underground had seeped upward into this chamber. The team measured the salinity, density, and temperature of the brine, noting that it supported a separate microbial community distinct from those near the vents or the bioluminescent fissure. The pool's edge contained crystalline ridges shaped by repeated evaporation before the cavern flooded completely. These salt formations were jagged and translucent, like shards of glass rising from the floor. Their patterns revealed the cyclical wet and dry phases that the cavern experienced long before it filled with seawater. This alone provided an invaluable timeline for understanding fluctuations in regional climate and sea level. As the team continued studying the brine pool, they noticed small gas bubbles rising from its depths. The bubbles were primarily methane, trapped in sediment since the cavern's dry period. Their release was gradual, barely perceptible, yet it indicated active geological processes still occurring beneath the chamber floor. This finding suggested that organic matter buried deep within the cave system was slowly decomposing and generating methane. Such features provided further evidence that the system had once been a thriving dry cave environment teeming with life. The submarine moved deeper into the chamber, navigating around the labyrinth of gypsum crystals. Eventually, the cavern opened into another passageway. Compared to the earlier tunnels, this one was unusually smooth and oval-shaped, as though sculpted by fast-moving water. The experts theorized that a subterranean river once surged through this corridor during periods of extreme flooding at the end of the last ice age. The tunnel descended sharply, pressure increased, and the walls took on a polished sheen. After several minutes, the sub entered a final chamber, the deepest yet encountered within the Great Blue Hole's hidden network. This chamber was unlike any that came before it. The walls were covered in black, glassy rock, volcanic in nature. The experts froze. This proved a direct connection between the Great Blue Hole and ancient volcanic activity beneath the Caribbean. Lava had once flowed into this space, cooling into obsidian-like sheets. Mineral residue traced along the chamber walls indicated repeated heating events. The presence of volcanic rock beneath a limestone-dominated sinkhole challenged assumptions about the region's tectonic history. Even more remarkable was the spherical cavity at the chamber's center. It was too perfectly round to have formed from simple lava flow. Instead, it appeared to be a gas pocket, an ancient bubble trapped within the molten rock as it cooled. Over millennia, water dissolved the cavity's inner walls, creating a hollow that resonated with every vibration. This explained the rhythmic pulses detected earlier. The chamber's acoustics amplified the faint movement of currents throughout the subterranean system. The experts realized that the entire geological evolution of the Great Blue Hole was far more complex than previously understood. Volcanic activity, subterranean rivers, dry cave periods, mineral saturation, hydrothermal interactions, and rising sea levels had all shaped its formation. Each chamber told a different part of the story, revealing how dynamic and interconnected Earth's geology truly is. The submarine remained in the volcanic chamber for as long as safety would allow, gathering data, scanning rock layers, and capturing imagery. The combination of limestone sediment, volcanic glass, and mineralized structures provided a multi-layered narrative extending back hundreds of thousands of years. At last, the team began the ascent. The return journey through the interconnected tunnels took them once more through the gypsum fields, past the brine pool, up the spiral-carved pillars and silt corridors, and into the conical archive chamber. Each feature now appeared in a new light, its role in the cavern's formation clearer after exploring the deeper structures. When they finally broke through the surface, the experts knew they had uncovered something far greater than a sinkhole. It was a subterranean world, a multi-chambered vault of geological, biological, and climatic history preserved with astonishing clarity. The Great Blue Hole had revealed itself as an evolving, interconnected system shaped by forces from deep within the Earth and far above its surface. If you liked this video, please give it a like and subscribe to our channel. Also, leave your comments below and tell us, what do you think the experts will discover deep inside the Great Blue Hole? We want to hear from you. Thank you for watching and see you next time.